Ioanna.
Wow.
Um,
Didn't know it did that.
I've never had that happen before. My name is Ioanna Paraskevopoulos. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Action Tank. Action Tank is a think tank in Cincinnati, Ohio. Action Tank partners with artists to research and promote new public policy solutions at the local government level. We are very excited to join our friend Wendy from Policy Matters Ohio, a statewide think tank, to put on this training. I'll give a brief overview. The reason we decided that this training would be relevant is obviously last summer we all experienced the Black Lives Matter protests, and I personally was still working at City Hall in Cincinnati at that time, and we got thousands and thousands and thousands of emails from people asking to defund or restructure the police department. Something I noticed was that not one of those emails asked for a meeting with my boss, who was an elected official, or with other city administration officials. And we thought people out there who are hungry for change and really want to advocate for change might not have kind of all the tools in their toolbox that they could as they think about their long game strategy for how to engage local governments on this issue. So that's why we put this session together, and we hope it's helpful. Since this is such a small group, really interrupt us anytime if you have questions or put questions in the chat. It's broken into two sections. So the first section will be a lesson on local budgets, and Wendy from Policy Matters will lead that. Then we actually have a recording by a wonderful local actress who couldn't be here virtually in person tonight. But it's on how to give an impactful 2-minute speech. And we were thinking it would be useful for folks who are giving public comment at their local government meetings. And then we'll kind of shift gears and talk about how to frame up your specific request so that it fits into a city budget structure. Hilly and I will lead that. Hilly will talk a little bit about do's and don'ts for approaching your elected officials. And then we have a fantastic presentation by a local dance troupe in Cincinnati called Tones. They focus on the intersection of art and public policy. And they have some really wonderful examples of art that they have worked on to impact public policy. So with that, I'll introduce my colleague Hilly to introduce herself, and then we'll hand it over to Wendy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hilly. As Ioanna mentioned, I work with her at Action Tank, doing a lot of educational program kind of stuff like we are doing tonight. Before I started at Action Tank, I worked with Ioanna at Cincinnati City Hall. We both worked for the same elected official who also happened to chair the Budget and Finance Committee. And so we worked on the budget for me about 3 years. And I think Ioanna, you did it 4 times. So we have a lot of experience doing this, and I'm really excited to share it with you. I'll pass it off to Wendy.
Well, thank you so much, Hilly. I think we all want, sort of in a broad framework. Well, I'm going to start talking about how do you develop the basis for analysis, sort of a reference tool you'll use to build wherever you're going. We want you to leave this session with more confidence. That's our goal. I'm going to talk about the technical tools I've learned in local budget analysis, particularly looking at the police budgets. We've got great supportive speakers talking about how to talk better, and probably most importantly of all, the Pones Dance Troupe gives you a sense about how to take care of yourself and what is really very difficult and draining work. So it's very exciting to be part of this sort of broadened scope. It's not just an academic scope. It's like, how do you move into this movement prepared for the long run? Now, I do the first part of that, and that's the local budget analysis, some technical tools. So I'm gonna share my screen now. and start my PowerPoint. And we'll start up here. We're calling our training session, Policing and the People, Understanding the Local Budget and Organizing for Local Needs. Let me expand that. There we go. Policy Matters Ohio got involved in this last summer because we are aware, on the one hand, that all of our cities and county and state governments have been under extreme fiscal pressure from the anti-austerity movement in politics. It has reduced resources. We were aware even last summer, as the protests started, that they were driven in part by all of the needs of our peoples and communities, and that the police often bear the brunt of many different aspects of social needs. This, in a sense, this cartoon captured some of what's going on in communities in Cleveland, our hometown, where the police department deals with homeless people on the street, deals with drug possession and drug dealers, deals with school security. And in a resource-constrained environment, how do you think about expanding this out so the right people are doing the right tasks? That was sort of our starting point. Now, we realized we had to focus on the police budget because that's where everyone we were working with up in Cleveland was focused. So you have to start, when you're thinking about the local budget, you have to start with the big picture. And that's all of these different sort of rings of funding, programs, resources, and regulations that come down from the federal government, from the state government, to the local government, to you on the receiving end of services. All of this matters when you're looking at your local budget. Within the local budget, we focus today on the city budget, but the environment is complicated and there are many important actors that bear on the needs of the people and the policing issues. We're looking at cities. Counties are major players in the municipal courts and the judicial system. You have to think about, where's the transit authority? How do people get to work and to where they need to go? Schools are big institutional players. Councils of governments like NOACA or in Morpsey, it's called, in Central Ohio. I'm not sure what it's called in Cincinnati, but it is focused on, it holds the federal funding and disperses the federal funding for many services throughout the region. There are colleges and universities, special health and human service districts, the child care system, the judicial system, the housing system. All of these different actors play a role in providing the services that people need and want. And ultimately, when we get down to what are the expanded needs of our communities, we have to spread out to all of these institutions. How are they interrelated? Who do they serve and who makes decisions about them? Today, we're focusing on the cities. In terms of state and local general direct expenditures, what state and local governments spend their money on, you'll see the police is not high up in the list. It's this pink bar, a little less than halfway down. However, when you look at how that's, who bears the brunt of that cost, it is not the state. Some local governments, which includes your counties, your townships, and your human services, it's a share of their budget. It's the municipalities who spend most of their money on supporting the policing function, which is why we're focusing in on that today. Now here, we first want to spend a couple minutes on the power structure. And we decided to put this up front and center in our training because last summer when we were out on the streets, my colleague Kalitha Williams, who's moved on to AARP, a great institution, she was out walking in the streets with protesters and she looked to her right and she saw Mayor Ginther there walking with the protesters. And she was sort of outraged. She thought, I am a protester, but I am protesting you and you should be in City Hall fixing the problem that I am protesting against. So understanding where is the power and what should they be doing is critical to addressing the problem. So just as background, Ohio has about 250 cities. We have 680 villages. We have over 1,300 townships. They each have their own budgets and their own hierarchy of power structure. They all have elements of public safety. So it's important to understand how the one you're looking at is structured. This looks at a council management structure. Under a structure like this, which many of our smaller governments are structured like, city council, the citizens elect a city council, which sets management and budgetary policy. The city council then hires a city manager who then appoints department directors and oversee the various functions of various departments. This is the council's manager structure of the city of Cleveland Heights, a place in which we've done a lot of work. Here, power is really centered in city council, and city council is very instrumental. Many of our bigger cities have a mayor council structure, like the city of Columbus, in which the mayor is the executive, the executive branch. The mayor is elected by the people. The city council is elected by the people. City council controls budgetary policy, and the mayor is in charge of management policy over the department heads. Within this structure, you need to know who's who does what, and especially with the, who do you need to be talking to get at what you need to do to analyze your budget. So number one, figure out the power structures. At city council, is there a city manager? Is it the mayor? And who's in your various departments? This is a flow chart of or an organizational chart of the city of Cincinnati. We include it because it's very clean and neat. It's easy to understand the flow of information and responsibility, and to see the various departments, how they relate to the mayor. Other communities are not this clean. Look at your organizational chart, and from there you will get a better understanding of where to get started in talking to people. Now, once you understand the structure, the power structure of your community, you're going to have to start getting involved in the process. That's a hard one to understand. And we're next going to go into, beyond the process, we're going to go into the city budget documents itself. But I can't tell you how hard it was for me to understand the process in the city of Cleveland. Every community has its own process for budget, and the timing of the budget and what they prioritize and when they do it. But roughly, this is it. The steps were in the city budget book. That's where I would start in understanding the key steps in a local budget process and where to get involved. In Ohio, the city fiscal year is typically January 1st to December 31st. That's different from the state. The state fiscal year is July 1st to June 31st. The federal government is different from that. Ohio cities are typically on a calendar year. All cities in Ohio have to get their tax budgets into the county budget commission in midsummer, June, July. So getting your tax budget finished, typically during the month of July, there will be hearings, and the tax budget says what kind of revenues are you anticipating for next year. The state has historically provided revenue sharing. They've cut it dramatically, but they still provide revenue sharing. The state budget commission is instrumental in dividing up that anticipated revenue sharing and assigning the millages that can be allocated under the property tax. So everybody gets their tax budget in midsummer, and there are typically hearings around that. You might want to be involved in those hearings. There are hearings before and after. A budget may be passed at any time during the year. Cleveland passes its budget, I believe, in March, and then publishes it in May. Other cities may pass it before their fiscal year starts. You'll have to find out what it is within your city. Within your 1 year, fiscal year, whatever it is, let's say it's a calendar year, you will have a budget. There will be money allocated. Money will be collected, but not all of the money will be spent as anticipated. So there is a reappropriations process near the end of the year in which you may want to be involved, particularly if you are advocating for programming in the police budget that has more to do with diversion and prevention. You may want to weigh in there. It's another element in the budget process you want to keep your eye out for. In the course of the year, a budget or estimate for the next year is also presented. You'll want to be aware of that. You'll want to be part of the process when a budget is adopted and the process rolls into the next year. So understanding the cadence of steps within your department and the cadence of hearings, when are citizens allowed to participate, is very important. I've always started with the budget book. The ones that I have addressed those steps, and I encourage you to do the same. Once you get into your actual budget, city budget documents, you're going to see some terminology that may look unfamiliar to you. And this is simply because budgets aren't structured for you and me to look at and understand this spending of city government. They're structured for the accounting purposes. They are structured to meet the terms of the general agreement on accounting principles, the GAAP principles. So these are accounting documents, and you'll see funds like the operating budget, the capital budget, revenues. You'll see information about debt and utilities. You'll see tax abatements, infrastructure funds, emergency funds. You'll see federal funds like the Community Development Block Grant or CDBG and HUD funds. Typically, this language will be defined for you. If you're lucky, it will be in a glossary within your own budget. If you cannot find a glossary within your city's budget, go to the City of Columbus. Their budget has the best glossary in the state. So you can, if you're looking and you're saying, what are special revenue funds? And you don't have a definition there before you, look it up at the City of Columbus budget book website. Use their glossary. You can look up everything here. This is not rocket science, but it's very tedious, and it's very, you just have to take the time to get, to answer your own questions. Okay, so where do you get information on the budget? The website of each city is your most important place, although it is not going to answer the questions that you have because it is not structured for you. It's structured for accountants. And so it's a real task. Sometimes, here's an example of when you'll want to put in a request for public information. I'm trying to dig into the federal funds that are received by the city of Cleveland and what they're used for. I finally found, and we'll look at this in a little bit, but I finally found Department of Justice expenditures, federal funds for the city of Cleveland within their single audit reports. It was not within the city's budget book. And it's not all federal funds, but it's an important source of federal funds, so I'm able to use that. I added an additional request for public information to the city of Cleveland to say, what additional funds, grant funds, do you get from the federal government and what are they used for? I also asked for, through a request for public information, for what the Federal Department of Justice funds have been used for in the city in each of the last 5 years. This is important because the federal funds in your city, in the city of Cleveland, they have ranged from less than $1 million in 1 year to over 30 million in another year. This can be significantly disruptive in the process of planning and hiring and providing public services. If your city is being disrupted by federal funding like this, it's something you want to know about. If you can, meet with your council member. Meeting and talking with people is your most critical source of information. Meet with your council people, ask them questions. Some will share, some won't. Meet with city officials if you can, ask them questions. You might even want to meet with party officials, let's say for the Republican Party and for the Democratic Party in your city. What are your priorities in public safety? This gives you the context for your budget analysis. Now, here's an example of the revenues of a city. And most city budgets that you look at will have a pie chart like this. You should just be aware that the lion's share of the municipal budget in Ohio comes from the municipal income tax. In Ohio, the income tax supports cities, the property tax supports schools, and the sales tax supports counties. That's how the pie is divided. So when you go to a city, you'll see the income tax is overwhelmingly the most important piece. In addition, state revenue sharing, although cut in half, remains an important source of funding. The property tax is about as big in the city of Cleveland as the state revenue sharing. And then there are various other smaller sources of revenue that may be of interest to you. Now we're moving in on the target. Within the city budget, there will be an operating budget, but the operating budget is big. The operating budget will include special revenue funds that are raised from a certain source and used for a certain purpose. It will include debt service funds. It may include enterprise funds that fund an airport or a baseball stadium. It may include proprietary funds that are used only for a single purpose, like pension funds. These are defined by law and have resources that are defined by law. They are less subject to public input. We focus in our analysis on the city budget and the police budget on the general revenue fund, which across major cities in Ohio, across major cities in Ohio is the biggest. This is where taxpayer dollars go and where local electeds make decisions. You want to look at your general revenue fund. Now, the Lincoln Land Institute looked at an average across big cities. How do cities on average spend their money? They found on average, cities are spending about 33% of their general revenue fund on public safety. But how do you define public safety? In the city of Cleveland, for example, public safety includes police, fire, emergency services, animal control, all of the functions of the consent decree. It includes FEMA type emergency operations. Cities will categorize their expenditures differently. So on average, 33% is spent on this sort of broad category of public safety. About a quarter is spent on environment and housing. And this can be everything from your building and planning and zoning department, your city planning department, through your water utility and your waste disposal. Government administration is small, about 8%. Interest on debt service appears there. Educational services show up across big cities. Transportation shows up again across big cities. I don't see that in Cleveland cities. Transportation is handled, or in Ohio cities, transportation is handled in a different way. But across the state, this is sort of the average. So you'll be thinking, how does my city vary from this average? Now, I'm going to talk a lot about the city of Cleveland because I'm analyzing the city of Cleveland budget. And I have to say, once you get into the budget documents for any local government, it feels like it's a mess. It may be really great for an accountant, but it's not standardized and it can be very confusing. Here in the city of Cleveland, we see public safety in 2020 took up almost 56% of the general revenue fund. That's very different from what we're seeing in across the other cities. We see about 12% of the budget is spent in public works, about 10% in subsidies and other administration, 6% on the judicial branch, and the others are small departments like finance, law, and so forth. Public safety is so big in Cleveland, it dwarfs other expenditures. Now, in Cleveland, the Public Works Department includes the Recreation Department. The 22 rec centers of that big city are embedded in there. You really have to search to find that kind of thing. But what really stands out is how overwhelmingly huge this is the primary public service people in Cleveland get. So a walk through the city's budget. I look at trend lines. I look at total city spending in the general revenue fund, and I compare it to police spending. Is police spending rising more quickly than the general revenue fund? Does it differ from the time frame, and why? And from there, you move deeper into the analysis. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is I'm going to stop sharing this timeline, and I'm going to share some of, I'm going to share the city of Cleveland's, I'm going to share something else. I'm going to share what it looks like to be on the website of the city of Cleveland. So let me get over to Google. Okay, now, where's here we go. Can you see my screen? Ioanna, can you see my, you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very important part of the process. This is the public records section of the city of Cleveland. I'm just going to show you how complicated it can get. Some of you have done this many times. You understand this well. Others of you have not done this before, and you may suffer the same confusion I did. I'm going to run through it quickly. Here in Cleveland, it's pretty easy to get into. They have a record center. You press your own record center. You can view the requests that you've made. You set up an account. And you can see here, I've made a lot of requests recently. And they notify me when when some data is there, they send me an email, I open up the request. Now to submit a request, that's been hard for me to figure out. Like, do I go through finance or law or the public safety group? A lot of my requests go straight to the public safety administration. This, for some reason, did I stop sharing? I think I stopped sharing. Let me get back into my, can you see the public records again?
No.
No, you aren't seeing that. Try again. Share is a real challenge for me. Here we go. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
So I'm in public safety. And it's like, okay, you're in public safety. What do you want? And I look here, it's like police, EMS. Okay, I want police. And then it says, well, what do you want? And I looked at it, I'm like, crime reports, accident reports, forfeitures, vehicle impoundment. I don't want any of this stuff. What do I do? So I come back up and I look more carefully and I find there is a public safety administration component in which I can choose all requests and then write in what I want. For some reason, that was very confusing to me. So be diligent, explore all avenues before you panic. Now I'm also going to look at the Department of the Department of Finance. This is where the budget books live, but it's not easy to get there. It's not easy to understand what it is you want to look at. So in Cleveland, you press on, there's a function that allows you to look at the budget books, but then you get a huge list of stuff like the collection agency. Do I want that? Do I want the budget for Cleveland Public Power? No, I don't want that. So let's see what's next. Oh, here's the budget for a major enterprise. Cleveland Water, here's the port. I don't want that. I go on through parking. And then once I'm through the enterprise zones, I start seeing something else, single audit. Well, what is single audit? I didn't look until late in the process. Here I found their single audit is where all of the federal grants live. Department of Agriculture, Energy, Health and Human Services, Housing. Eventually I get down to the Department of Justice. Here I see in the year of 2001 that the department, this is the Department of, where's the department? The Department of Labor gave the city 17 million, but let's see, where's Department of Justice? 6.0 million. Now the city of Cleveland has a budget of 218 million. 6 million's not much, but it can support a lot of officers, and it can go for targeted services that can affect the overall function of the department. For example, the head of Cleveland's Public Safety Committee, the councilman in charge of Cleveland's Public Safety Committee for City Council, said to us, when we got grants under the Obama administration, they focused on a lot of diversion and prevention. That changed under the Trump administration. The focuses were other, and you could see that when you do your analysis of staffing. You can see a boom and bust in what they're focused on, and that's driven in part by federal funding. I just find the federal funding to be a very important part. Okay, so let's go back to the slideshow. Okay. So a little bit more information on how you can compare your city. You're going to be looking at overall trends in public safety. You might want to look if you're involved in the budget process at budget corrections and reappropriations. I found the comprehensive annual financial report of the cities, which are also on their websites, very, very useful tools. They will frequently give 10 years back information on staffing, settlements, and other important information. If I have a city with a finance director that's willing to work with me, and I found in the smaller cities, finance directors are very, very easy to work with. I will be in communications with them about my questions. Now you're going to want to compare your city to other cities, like, are we heavily policed compared to other cities? Here are some resources. I'm going to load these into the chat after my sessions. The Department of Justice has, it collects information not on all cities. It's a voluntary program, but about on 9,000 cities across the country. It's called the FBI Uniform Crime Statistics, and they look at public employment by uniformed and by civilian personnel within a department. Governing Magazine has used that. Many people quote Governing Magazine. Their data is based on 2016. The FBI UCR data is now available through 2019. It's a better source. You can also get information on the racial composition of the police force at the Bureau of Justice. We'll put this up, sworn versus civilian citizens. And I have a good source for those of you in bigger cities. 538 and ProPublica obtained data from, I think it was 60 major cities with 10 years of settlement data that helps you see how much police misconduct has affected your city year over year. There's some fiscal data you just don't find in the budget book, and settlement data is one of them. In the case of the city of Cleveland, which I am looking at, the city is self-insured. And so there is a line item in the Department of Law that gives a number for settlements, judgments, and claims against the city. What I don't know, and I've asked for and not received, is what share of that multi-million line is attributable to police settlements year over year. Many cities will insure themselves against this kind of thing, and that's hard to find. In terms of settlements, the settlements will tell you how much a family is being charged. It doesn't tell you how much the city pays in its own court costs spent on negotiating the settlement. That's still a black box to me. I'm still trying to figure that out for the city of Cleveland. I'm told that suits from disciplined officers against whom there has been a settlement or a charge who are disciplined, and then they sue the city for disciplining them. It's another element of court costs that I'm still trying to figure out. There are costs of a lawyer culture, including equipment that a city buys on a standard basis, equipment they may get from the federal government through what's called the 1033 Department of Defense program, protective gear, and other costs. This is outside of the city budget. I've asked a lot of questions. The city of Columbus is listed and purchases a lot of standard stuff, including office equipment, clothes, from the Department of Defense. The city of Cleveland is a participant, but they just don't show up year over year. There is a coordinator for the state of Ohio, who says to me, yeah, the city of Cleveland participates, but they haven't bought anything recently. They haven't bought anything from the military for the last 10 years. Your city in Ohio may show up. In Cleveland, we look, in addition, at the cost of corrective action. There is the cost of administering the consent decree. Then there's the cost of elements of compliance, which are good things. They're things the police department should be funding on their own. Information technology, in-car equipment, training, and so forth. There's a cost to that, and it's probably worth finding out. I have not yet been able to find that out for Cleveland or other cities I've looked at. That is all part of what the reading public wants to see in your budget analysis. What is the cost of police misconduct in my city? And I found the Washington, D.C. Fiscal Policy Institute compared the cost of misconduct to the cost of alternative approaches in policing within the city of D.C. and what the trend lines are. Here in the Department of Policing within the District of Columbia, which is one of the nation's most progressive police departments, the city itself spends very little on violence prevention initiatives through the Department of Policing, $17.7 million out of a budget of $545.7 million. There are no doubt within the context and fiscal environment of the city of the District of Columbus, other additional services outside of that focused on prevention and diversion, but within this the city department itself, it's a very minuscule amount. I think that's what people are looking at. That's some folks who are talking seriously about defund and refund are looking at how do we spend money in a manner that diminishes violence without the use of force, without the police aspect of it. And so looking at how the funding spreads out between these two, and if there are advances year over year, tells you something about the power of your city. One thing as you undertake this analysis is you want to think about what it is that you want to see changed and whether it is a city function. If it is a city function, for example, within the Cleveland department, within the Cleveland General Revenue Fund, there is a Department of Public Health. And so I think about what is it that needs more funding in the Department of Public Health? And you think about, do we need some changes in the quality of the environment? Does our city need more affordable housing? Do people need more financial well-being, a sense of belonging, emotional well-being? How do they get to work? What are their social relationships? What aspects do you want to focus on in terms of quality of life for a city in which policing is causing problems? What kind of changes do you want? And then, given the change that I want to see, who makes decisions about it? How do I find out more about it? What are the barriers to getting to what do we need? And what are the opportunities for getting information and access? One important aspect of getting information is simply the public records request. Any document that is a public document that is not protected by law, there are a few elements that are, but not really in this area, you should have access to it. That said, if the city doesn't compile data in the way you want to see it, they are not beholden to give you data in the way you want. That's where I'm running into problems. I ask lots of questions and the cities tell me, we have that data, we don't look at it in that way. I don't have a document to send you, which is something I'm still working through. You should be aware that meetings are public. You can familiarize yourself with sunshine laws through a manual I'll put in the chat, what the open meetings law is. You can call Policy Matters Ohio at any time for technical assistance, especially if you're having trouble with public records requests. Because we work with local governments, we may know someone in the city who may be able to assist you in a mediation process or in a more aggressive request situation. And I'm here to tell you, analyzing the budget, getting the information you need will take persistence, follow-up, precision of request with examples, flexibility and adjustments for data you want but you can't get, and building relationships. And I'll put our numbers again in the chat box. So that's a very broad overview of how we've approached the local budget and the police budget. What questions can I answer? I've thrown a whole lot at you. I'm really interested in hearing what your questions are and what you're looking at as you move forward with your city.
If anybody has questions, they can feel free to unmute themselves or they can type them in the chat and we can read them that way.
Hi, this is Kate Elliott. I'm in Cincinnati. We have our final public budget hearing tomorrow. So this is like super awesome, but probably a little late. And the little, I'm on my community council and the little I'm trying to learn, it's just, you know, you talk about how it needs persistence. And golly, I don't know what exactly I'm asking other than, are there budget books for dummies? Are there, like, how do you get the crash course? And other than this, obviously, which, you know, I've got kids running around and I'm trying to get dinner cleared away. So will we be able to access this recording later so I can pay better attention? But how do you get informed enough to know what on earth you're talking about so that you can ask the questions, so that you can represent your community appropriately when it comes to public insight? Like, it's very overwhelming in this moment. And any other extra tips other than what you've already shared would be super helpful.
I would say, I mean, I've thrown a lot at you tonight. I think you need to understand how many, you need to understand the staffing patterns within your, are you in Cincinnati? What city?
Yes, I am. So I'm, yeah, city of Cincinnati. I'm in the suburbs, but city of Cincinnati.
You know, it's really helpful to understand how they're staffed. Cincinnati has a heavy police presence. They're second to Cleveland. I think maybe 34 police per 10,000 citizens. I don't know the division between uniformed and civilian officers, but I think Cleveland is very heavy in uniformed and Cincinnati is much, much better in that way. They have many more civilian officers. In the long run, you're going to understand how they respond to calls. Do civilians go out and respond to mental health calls or to animal control calls, you know, places in which you don't need someone out there with a gun on their hip. I think staffing is very important. And then beyond that, squint at your police budget. You know, look at your general revenue fund, get a sense of where the city's been. They'll give you 4 years in your 2021 budget. Just squint at the general revenue fund, look at the percent change there, and then go to the section on your policing and squint at that and look at the changes there. That's going to tell you if it's growing faster than the city budget or slower. And the staffing will also tell you over time, are you more heavily policed? Are they changing their staffing patterns? I think that's probably a starting point for you.
Thank you so much. That's really insightful.
Yeah, I am doing this giant study for Cleveland, and it's very boring to tell you the truth. But what it does is I've put together what the police budget is and what the single audit report says about how much Department of Justice money is coming in, and what the capital budget says they built and what they've spent on. So although it's really very boring, it does collect all those statistics in one place for someone like you. So you can say, oh, here's what's going on. I think every city sort of needs that. Not that they are doing a bad job in budgeting, but the budget documents are established for accounting purposes and not for you and me.
I see that Kenza has her hand raised.
Hi, Kenza.
Wendy, so sorry if you already addressed this earlier. This was a lot of information. It was all great, but I am like trying very hard to process all of it. So the question is, last year in Columbus, there was kind of like a visual that was going around showing how much the city of Columbus spends on policing versus education and other things. And then kind of the issue was that it turned out that the way that chart had been sourced didn't really work because the education budget didn't come from, the city of Columbus in the same way. And so it was kind of like an, sort of an inaccurate, I mean, it was true that that's how much the city is spending, but that's not, So I guess my question is what would you suggest in terms of making sure that when we're doing these kinds of comparisons, that all of our, numbers are accurate, especially considering how many different areas of local budget structures there are, I guess, that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if that question makes sense, but
yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's very, very hard. The city fund, to tell you the truth, what I'm finding is our big cities fund very little of what we want to see in terms of quality of life. They have external partners. For example, in the city of Columbus, I think, has an extensive partnership with the banks that raises money ostensibly for affordable housing. I don't know how many units they're building, but that money will never show up in the budget book. This is just, it is within the context of the city of Cleveland, and you will have to find that out from going and talking to the city. The city does not fund education. If you would rather see more money, less money for police and more for K through 12 schools, that's really an issue. That is more of a political issue. I don't think you're ever going to get to the data on that one. I mean, yeah, the city of Columbus gets some property taxes. Schools are primarily funded by property tax, and the county budget department is deciding on property levies for the schools and for the city at the same time. But I don't think it's a technical question. However, that said, because it does boil down, city finance and school finance boil down to the property taxes, I think that's one you can probably take down to levy issues. The problem is property tax levies within a city. It's very tedious work, and a lot of the levies that we pass in a city fund human services that we all support, developmental disabilities, mental health. We don't want to attack them in any way. So I almost think if you're saying, look, we need less public funding on police and more public funding on early education, on childcare, and on schools, it's more of a political argument. You want to get the childcare people. What the city of Cincinnati has done, though, has gotten childcare people organized that went and passed a levy option for additional funding for preschool on a local level. You do want to see more than that. But how do you take it from the police? There's not a direct line there. So you're talking more, if you're talking about funding within the city for public safety and then funding externally for mental health and education, I think you've got more of a political argument you're making. It's not satisfactory. The more precise information you have on funding of the different areas that you want to go, that you want to see boosted, is a good thing. In my view, the problem is that we have dramatically underfunded education and affordable housing and mental health services. It may be that policing may be overfunded or may not be, but it may be one service that is adequately funded, and everything else has just been starved for the last 40 years. I'm not sure of that. I'm not sure of that in every city, but I think we need to keep our eye on the fact that we need to be asking for more money for housing and social services and food and homelessness. We need more money, and it's not all going to come from the police.
Yeah, I think that the way that you articulated it, that there isn't a direct line between a lot of these funding pieces is actually really helpful, and some of the trouble when you're advocating for these things to, if we're trying to divest from the police and put it elsewhere, and we aren't, you know, all accountants and budget experts, it's very hard to figure out the mechanics of that.
It's not a straight line. And if you're thinking to yourself, I want less money for the city of Columbus for policing, and I want more money for the Adamus Board for mental health services, there's not a way of getting money from here to there. You need to be working on a state strategy. The state has abandoned its responsibility as the drug epidemic has grown. We need people like you, Kenza, to work with us and drag us into a much stronger voice on the state's abdication of responsibility in mental health. The state of Ohio uses federal funds. They cut community mental health. People in Medicaid can get services for addiction. People who are not on Medicaid but are too poor for rehabilitation services used to get much better community services. The state has cut that funding. There's so many areas in which we need to raise our voices for better state funding. The state of Ohio is lean and mean, and it's getting worse with this new budget. Well, thank you all so much. I think I'm over time, and I'm very grateful for all the time that you've granted me today. I'm going to throw some stuff up in the chat, and I'll be around if you have more questions. Feel free to chat with me.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Wendy. Now I think Hilly is going to pull up a recording by our arts partner, Maggie Lou Rader. She is a terrific actress and writer and director here in Cincinnati. And she is going to talk about how to give an impactful 2-minute speech. So all you folks in Cincinnati who are looking forward to making public comment at the budget hearing tomorrow night, this is for you.
Hello, Cincinnati City Council School folks. My name is Maggie Lou Rader. I am a professional stage actor and a member of the Dramatist Guild as a playwright. And I so wish I could be with you today in person. However, I am currently doing a dress rehearsal for my first in-person performance in over a year. So I can't think of a better reason to not be able to be with you today. Do check out the show. It's we're recording it so it can be streamed on Broadway on demand. It's through the Human Race Theater Company. You can just go to humanracetheater.com. I'm playing Marie Antoinette in a fabulous play called The Revolutionists. Do check it out, and you can stream it live in your very own home. Okay, that's enough of my plug. Today, I am here to chat with y'all about how to give a clear, effective 2-minute speech so that you can say all of the amazing persuasive things that you want to say in front of City Council. All right, so first up, let's talk about knowing your parameters and your environment. So basically, know exactly what you're walking into. What's your time limit? We're currently talking about a 2-minute speech, but this is good advice for any public speaking that you have to do. Know exactly what your time limit is so that you can prepare everything to fit within that parameter. There are other things to prepare and to think about. So how will you be notified when your time is up? Is there a bell? Does someone get up and tell you to stop talking? Does the mic cut off? Know exactly how that you will be notified when your time is up. Also, this doesn't always happen, but sometimes when you're doing some public speaking, they'll give you some sort of warning when you have a minute left or 30 seconds left. Know if they are going to give you any sort of notification when you're starting to run low on time. And it's really going to help you pace yourself. So if you think, oh no, I've saved my most important thing for the very end of my speech, I'm running low on time, I want to make sure I get to it. That's an incredibly useful tool that sometimes you get, sometimes you don't, but know if you are going to get it or not. Something else to think about is, when does your time start? Is it whenever you're walking up to the podium? Is it whenever you start talking? Is it when you stand up? Is it when the person in front of you is done? If you're giving a 2-minute speech, knowing when your time begins can be the difference of 10, 15, even 20 seconds. And when you're looking at a time limit of 2 minutes, that's a lot of time. So know exactly when your time is going to begin. Who will be present at this meeting? If you're someone like me who struggles with anxiety, I want to know exactly what I'm walking into. So am I going to be speaking just for City Council? Are there going to be additional committees present? Chances are, if you're going there to speak, other people are going there to speak as well. So just know exactly who is going to be in the room to help alleviate any extraneous thoughts or worries or anxieties, so you know exactly who you're talking to. It also helps me alleviate anxiety if I know what room I am going to be in. It's a big difference whether you're walking into a giant convention center or if you're walking into a small room at City Hall. Those are very different environments. And they're definitely going to impact the way you give your prepared speech. So I advise you to know exactly what the room you're walking into looks like, and just to help set yourself up for reducing that anxiety and that stress. Now, if you don't know the answers to any of these things, this is information that you are entitled to have. You can absolutely figure out the answers to all of those things so that you know exactly how to give the most impactful speech. All right, so let's move on, and we're going to talk about tone. Moving on from the parameters in our environment, let's talk about tone. Something really useful, another resource you have at your disposal, is you can go online and you can watch old videos of city council meetings, including videos where people like you and I go and talk. And I'd encourage you to watch a few people give their speeches. See what stands out. You know, if you see someone and you think, ooh, that was a really great speech. They really made me pay attention. Go back, watch them again, and ask yourself, why was I paying attention to them? What was it that they were doing that was successful to help their argument and to help them get your attention and to watch? Who stands out to you and why? What made their argument super interesting and compelling to you? And of course, the other side of that coin is useful as well. Who didn't stand out? Because we can learn just as much from watching people who maybe weren't as successful, so you can see exactly what you want to avoid. Like, oh, they never made eye contact, and that made their argument a little forgettable. Let me make sure that I bring that in. I always tell my acting students, we learn most from people who are better than us. So I was lucky enough to get to see Patrick Stewart and Kate Fleetwood do Macbeth, the Scottish play, on the West End in London. And y'all, I learned more from watching them than reading a gazillion books about the Scottish play whenever I was doing the show. We learn by watching people who are better than us. So watch those videos and see who stands out to you and why. So continuing talking about tone, consider calling in versus calling out. Both can be effective and valid depending on what you're trying to do. Do you need to call out past behavior that was problematic to the solution before you call in and invite them to be part of the solution? That's valid. Be aware that calling out can lead to shame if it's done callously or quickly or without purpose. And that can shame makes, it's a biological thing, makes people shut down and step back and not pay attention, versus inviting and calling people in to be part of the solution really does help people engage with you in your argument. That's not to say calling out is not effective at times, but just be careful as that is a tool that's in your speaking tool belt. All right. Going on knowing who is in that room, know exactly who you're trying to reach. It's like, you know what? This is an argument for Chris Seelbach, not Becky. You know, it's like knowing exactly who you are trying to reach and sculpting that argument. It's like, okay, I'm not going to get Betsy Sunderman on board with this argument, I don't think, but let me really sculpt this argument to try to reach Chris Seelbach, because I think he's my best bet. Knowing who you're trying to reach and impact so that you can really, really, really sculpt your argument for your intended audience. All right, y'all, here is a big one. Feelings are not facts, but get to know them both. Decide what role feelings and facts both have in your message. Y'all, feelings can be incredibly engaging. It can really help bring someone in, but if you don't have those facts, it's hard to implement policy based on feelings. Facts are really going to help you come up with action items while you're inviting people to be part of your solution. Because I'm a theater artist, I'm going to take it back to Shakespeare and theater. So if you've ever seen or read the play Julius Caesar, which I'm sure y'all all did in high school, I know I had to, once Julius Caesar is killed at the Capitol, Brutus, who is an incredibly reserved, logical man, he goes and talks to the plebes of Rome, and he gives a very well thought out reason and speech as to why Julius Caesar needed to die and how Rome will be better off. His arguments are clear, concise, well laid out. It's not terribly interesting. It's all facts, absolutely, and all incredibly stoic and thought out. Mark Antony gets in front of the plebes and does the exact opposite. He comes on and he says, he was my friend, he was but Brutus is an honorable man, but I have all of these feelings about what's happened, and I'm really struggling to come to terms, but this is how I feel about this, this is how I feel about this, this is how I feel about this. And the plebes burn Rome to the ground. It's incredibly impactful and interesting to listen to Mark Antony talk. However, Rome does burn to the ground. So it probably wouldn't be very great theater, but it probably would have been better for Rome if someone would have gotten up and kind of hit somewhere in between Brutus's speech and Mark Antony's speech. Not great theater, but probably great for implementing policy. Feelings are not facts, but get to know them both, and they can both be incredibly useful to you. Also, knowing where your strengths lie. Y'all, I am a Scorpio. I am a ball of emotions all the time. I know that I do best whenever I work through my emotions first, and then I bring in facts. My husband is the exact opposite. When emotions are present, he struggles to think clearly and logically to come up with an argument. So he needs to start with the facts, and then he can bring in an emotional connection. Knowing how you work best is going to be super important as you sculpt your argument. All right. what tone will be effective versus what's going to make you feel better. If you're like me, I have given Oscar award-winning performances in my car on the way to work. I have come up with incredible arguments while I'm washing my hair in the shower. I love coming up with my arguments for things out loud. And then I temper them down and sculpt and work to make sure that they're incredibly clear and concise. But be careful of just going in and giving those car chats and shower chats to city council, because that might be for you to make you feel better versus what's actually going to get change implemented. But by all means, pour some wine, talk to your friends, have a therapy session if you're really struggling to figure out how to make your argument clear. Process all of those things. But make sure when you get up in front of city council or when you're doing any public speaking, your focus is on what will be effective versus what's going to make you feel better, because you can do that in your own time. All right, let's move on from tone. We're going to talk about knowing how you talk and write and talk that way. For an example, I just wrote a play that is about the match women labor movement and the Ripper murders in London of 1888. And I wanted one of the characters to come in with binders and things like that. And I was like, hey, I could sit here and do all this research as to what binders might have looked like in 1888. And instead, I was like, no, I want to write this scene. So what I wrote down is exactly what I thought. I said, you know what? I want her to come in with the Victorian equivalent of Leslie Knope binders, because I'm a big fan of Parks and Rec and I think it's great. And that's exactly what I wanted. And as we've been workshopping the play, that has become one of the actors' favorite stage directions, because she said, I know exactly what you mean. It sounds like you. There's no room for interpretation here when it comes to what this is. It sounds like you, and it's very clear, and it gets the job done. Because that's how I talk. That's exactly what I wanted, and I want her to come in with Leslie Knope binders. So that's what I wrote. So when you're writing and talking, make sure you're writing and talking like you, because if you're putting on affectations, it can really come off as disingenuous. You know, I wanted to be a news reporter when I was younger, and I would watch videos of Barbara Walters, and I thought she was so cool. Still think she's really cool. But I would try to sound like Barbara Walters. And whenever I was doing these auditions and things, I'd hear myself back, and it sounded, I can listen to them now, and I sounded incredibly disingenuous because I wasn't talking like me. I was trying to talk like Barbara Walters. And y'all, I'm not Barbara Walters. I'm a country girl from Mangum, Oklahoma. And I've learned throughout my career that my voice is what makes me me. And my arguments are going to be better listened to and better heard if I talk like me, because it's going to come off as genuine. And that's always what you're wanting to be going for. But part of that is figuring out how to capture your message at its best. Are you a list maker? Do you need to journal and write it all out? Do you need to talk it out? Y'all, I'm a talker. So I will sometimes talk to my husband for as long as he'll let me about things. I'll implement getting a voice recorder, and I will just talk it out, and then I'll listen back. There's a really great author called Brene Brown, and what she's a Southern lady like me. She works through her thoughts out loud. And so whenever she's writing a new book and she's trying to work through all the thoughts and all the things, she pays for a beach vacation with all of her friends. They hang out on the beach all day while she's kind of navigating some stuff. They come together at night. She pours them all a glass of wine and gives them all a notebook and says, please take notes while I talk at you for a while. And then they read their notes back to her because she needs to work it out loud. And then, you know, goodness knows she has the money and the time to provide her friends a great vacation. If you can do that, by all means, pay for a beach vacation as you're working at your city council speech. But know how you write and talk that way, and figure out how to capture your message at its absolute best. All right, so now let's move on to the basic structure of a speech. For a 2-minute speech, you're looking at about 250 to 275 words, depending on how quickly you talk. That is not a lot of words to get your point across. So you want to think about how to capture it concisely. First of all, you're going to want to figure out what's the problem? Why are you here? What's wrong and how has it personally impacted you? Give them a hook. Why should they listen to you specifically? I'm going to give you an example of the hook that I used when I spoke at City Council last summer. Over the last month, I have personally seen actions of the CPD that were instigative at best, abusive, and potentially murderous at worst. I gave them a first-hand account. This is what I saw, and this is how it impacted me. All right, now let's talk about the cause of the problem. Once you've identified the problem, let's talk about the cause. Why is this a problem? How has public policy created and perpetuated the problem? Think outside the box when you're trying to think of the cause of the problem, and tell them something that they're not likely to hear that day. This is what I mentioned in the same city council speech. I'm tired of seeing those people elected to represent me lead with fear. Police only put on riot gear when they're afraid. Blustering city council members storm out of meetings calling passionate citizens mobs when they're afraid. Mayors sit silent at dinner tables and let their daddies fight their battles for them when they're afraid. So that was what I said, but I wanted to think of another example of something that maybe people weren't likely to hear that day. So here's another example of identifying the cause of the problem. In 1704, the modern police force was created as slave patrol in the Carolinas. If that role lies at the heart of the creation of the body, how could that function not continue to greatly impact our communities through bias in policing? And what I've tried to do with both of those examples is call in to say, hey, you didn't implement slave patrol in the Carolinas, but this is at the heart of this institution. Or, hey, I'm seeing people not be jerks, I'm seeing them act with fear. And trying to call in with identifying the cause of the problem. Alrighty, so once you've identified the problem, the cause of the problem, you're going to want to offer your personal solution. Now, how do you think this problem could be fixed today, tomorrow, 20 years from now? Because public policy does not change overnight, but what decisions could be made today could greatly affect our world tomorrow. Pose to them selfish reasons to get on your side. How will it benefit them specifically? Are they running for re-election? Have they done something that really tarnished their reputation, and this would be a chance to really help it out? Sometimes it helps to find a common enemy. If the whole council wants to be mayor and the current mayor just sat silently at a dinner table while their dad fought off someone asking them questions, bring it up. If it helps you find common ground with your audience, that's okay. So this was from my speech that I gave at City Council. As for my solution, demand those funds go toward ending homelessness in Cincinnati, because the average age of a Cincinnati homeless citizen is 8 years old. Fund education. Invest in Black communities. Fund programs to aid victims of domestic abuse, hungry children, the disabled, and your citizens battling addiction. Stop making decisions based on fear of your citizens or your own re-election chances or hopes of becoming mayor. There are many different kinds of bravery. See if you can find yours. All right, so now that we've talked about the structure of the speech, we're going to talk about rehearsing. So I'm currently about to go into tech for the Revolutionists, but I've been in rehearsals for 4 weeks, making sure that the show was in the place that we wanted it to be. It's natural and necessary to rehearse any kind of public speaking, just to make sure you feel comfortable and you're set up for success. Knowing your message safely fits within those parameters that we talked about earlier is so important. You can take notes up there with you. So what notes would you find helpful? Do you want to take the entire speech up there? Great. Would it help you if it was double spaced? Would it help you if you had a size 16 font versus a size 12 font? Do you struggle to read when you're nervous, like a lot of people do? Would it help you to have an outline instead of your entire speech verbatim? Do you struggle to see words and interpret words when you're stressed? Would it be helpful to just bring pictures to remind you of the structure of your speech? I am going to talk a little bit about punctuation because, again, I'm going to take it back to Shakespeare. So when Shakespeare was writing, the English language was still very young and literacy rates were very low. So the idea of grammar, as our English teachers taught us, really didn't exist. So what Shakespeare did is he was putting these plays up pretty quickly, actually much quicker than we've put up the Revolutionists. And so whenever he was getting the actors the scripts, he wrote the punctuation to help them. So me, as an actor, I can look at Shakespeare's first folio and say, and grammar would make any English teacher mad, but I know, it's like, okay, well, he put a semicolon here. I know that he wants me to do this here with the text. He put in a comma here. I know he wants me to do this with the text. They were kind of a blueprint for the performers to get those plays up quickly and to make sense of the poetry. And you're allowed to do that. No one's grading any speech that you have. So if you want to put in a comma every single time you want to pause just to remind yourself, you're allowed to do that. Use punctuation to help you. Forget the grammar because these notes are for you and no one else. All right. Now, something else that's super important whenever you're talking, I've been trying to do it with all of y'all today, give yourself time to look up and make eye contact. One, it really humanizes your message. And if I sat here and talked to y'all all day just like this, it would subconsciously give you permission to sit back and disengage. However, whenever I'm really working on maintaining that eye contact with you, it subconsciously connects us. So even though I am not even speaking to you currently right now, I hope that because I've taken the time to make sure that my camera is right above my notes so that I can easily look down, you do feel like I've connected with you because I'm maintaining that eye contact as much as possible. Rehearse the moments that you are going to look up and make eye contact. Sometimes whenever I have my notes and I want to make sure I look up, I put a little red dot in my notes so that I can know that's when I have a chance to get up and look up and make eye contact. And I can also look back down and find that red dot so I don't lose my place. Something else that I like to do is if I have my speech in front of me, I follow along with my finger. I know about the rate that I talk, so I can follow along with this finger. And if I do get stuck and lost, I can look down and I know that that finger is going to be really close to where I was in my speech. All right. Again, 2 minutes is not a lot of time, so give yourself a safety cushion of time. Try to consistently come in at 1 minute and 45 seconds because stuff goes wrong. Phones go off, mics fall out of their holders, mics give feedback. Someone may open a door to come into the room while you're talking, and it might derail the conversation for 5 seconds. And that can be a lot of time when you're trying to fit in an entire argument in a 2-minute time period. So give yourself a safety cushion of 10 to 15 seconds just to make sure that you're going to get your message across. Give yourself the tools that you need to be as confident as possible because speaking in front of people is scary and what you're doing is brave. So we are going to do a quick warm-up. Make sure that the last thing you're worried about is your tongue or your lips being able to articulate the words that you've written down. I'm going to give you the best and easiest little warm-up I've ever had. I teach this to my students all the time, and if you're just going into an audition, this is a great way to make sure all of your articulators are going to be on your side. So you need a pencil or a pen, and you're going to stick it where your nose meets your upper lip, and you're going to you're going to kind of use duck lips, but you're going to use your lips to hold the pencil there. And if you're new to this, you may need to tilt your head back a little bit and see how far forward it can come before it falls out. You're really going to try to use these muscles to hold that pen there. And all you're going to do is you're just going to talk. So I'm going to talk at you for a few seconds. Let's all do it together. We'll all look silly. It's okay. But this is the greatest little quick warm-up. All right. So I am going to tell you that my name is Maggie Lou Rader. I've lived in Cincinnati for about 11 years now. I've worked at the No Theater Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, Playhouse in the Park. So if you've seen a play in the last 10 years, you've probably seen me on stage at some point in time. And I just appreciate you supporting the arts, supporting the theater, supporting city government, and I think you're really great. And now take that out, and hopefully your lips and your tongue just feel like they're having to work a little bit less than they were before. It's a great way just to jumpstart those articulators to make sure that you know they're on your side and they're ready to go with your message. Before you get up and talk, our bodies have a natural response to stress. You've probably heard of the fight or flight response, and it's actually more fight, flight, or freeze. And getting up and speaking in front of people publicly has been likened to being chased by an animal, that your body can go into that same place of stress, and that's not fun for anybody. So give yourself permission to take a deep breath before you go. If you're still feeling stressed, let me teach you a quick little breath trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in for 5 seconds. We are going to hold our breath for 3, and we're going to breathe out for 7 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to do it with you. All right, we're going to breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold for 1, 2, 3. And breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's do that one more time, okay? Breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold for 1, 2, 3. Breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when you do that, you're basically resetting that breath, you're resetting your body, and you're telling your body that you are safe, you're okay, nothing is chasing you, you're okay, and that everything is going to be all right. If you mess up when you're talking, that's okay. Every actor can tell you so many horror stories of when things go wrong on stage. It happens. You're a person in a room with other people. Stuff goes wrong, and that's okay. Try what we always tell ourselves as actors. If you mess up, don't let that mess up impact the rest of the scene. It happens. You got to move on. So if you mess up, take a breath and refocus, getting back to the point. If you mess up and you feel that panic in your body start, which is a completely natural response, something I try to do is I try to get out of the panic that's happening in my head, because that's all emotional thought. I try to bring it to the tangible senses. So if I'm panicking in my head, I try to think, what do I feel right now? It's like, okay, I feel wood on my fingertips. What do I see right now? I see a green tree outside my window. What do I smell right now? I smell coffee from my breakfast. Bring it back to your senses, because it's going to get you out of that panic brain. It's going to get you out of your head and back into your body. So think about what you see. Think about what you smell. Think about what you can hear. Think about what you can see. Bring it back to your senses, because that's going to get you out of that panic brain. And the most important thing, know that you've put in the work to set yourself up for success. If there's something that you want to bring that gives you courage, whether it be a family heirloom of jewelry, whether it be a toy that you can hold in your pocket that belongs to your child to remind you why you're doing it, anything that you can think of that will set you up for success, you're allowed. It's your time. And you're allowed to do and prepare and bring whatever you feel the need to set yourself up for success. That's all I have. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you again for bringing me on to do this. I've had such a good time working with all of y'all at City Council. And I just can't wait to see all the amazing things that you all do to change our city and your own cities and communities for the better. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out. My email address is maggieRader@live.com, MaggieRader@live.com. Or you can go to my website, MaggieLouRader.com, and you can send me a message that way as well. Thank y'all so much for your time, and keep kicking butt, yeah? Bye.
Terrific. Okay. Now we are going to jump straight into the second half of this training. For folks who joined a little late, I'll reintroduce myself while Hilly pulls up the slides again. My name is Ioanna Paraskevopoulos. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Action Tank, which is a think tank in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thanks for sticking with us. The second half of our presentation is about how to frame your budget request so that it makes sense to policymakers in the context of the budget documents that they're looking at. And also, hi, Catherine. I see that you turned your camera on. It's nice to see your face. Hilly and I will go through these slides pretty quickly. And then we'll hand it over to Pones. Pones is a wonderful local dance troupe in Cincinnati, Ohio that focuses on the intersection of art and public spaces, public advocacy, public policy. All right, so I'll jump in here. Can we have the next slide, please, Hilly? Okay, so how does your request that you're asking your local government for fit into the city's budget? To understand this, I wanted to go over a couple of basic terms that will be relevant no matter what city or municipality you are working in. So operating budgets versus capital budgets. An operating budget is an ongoing operating expense. It usually includes personnel, basic services, programs. So basic services like trash, recycling, street cleaning. Now that we're into summer, I know a lot of folks are using the recreation center pools here in Cincinnati or day camps like my son is going to. That is considered a basic service as well. It's something that happens every year. And so the city council will allocate funds from the operating budget with the expectation that it will continue into the following year. And the reason the distinction is so important usually has to do with the source of the funds. So the governments won't want to allocate funds to operating expenses unless they are reasonably assured that those funds will be available to continue those programs next year. So standing in contrast to operating budgets are capital budgets. Capital budgets usually have to do with new construction, so building a building or maintenance of facilities, the acquisition of property. say the city wants to build a new police station, which is something that's going on in Cincinnati, for example. They are doing a big search of buildings in a few different neighborhoods to determine which location will be the most cost-effective and central and efficient. The acquisition and construction of any new property would fall under capital budget. Some infrastructure improvements as well would fall under capital budgets, like building a bridge, for example. Okay, next slide, Hilly. Thanks. So the next set of terms that is important to understand is restricted versus unrestricted. So both capital and operating dollars will be either restricted funds or unrestricted funds. So restricted funds are just what they sound like. They're funds that can only be used for certain purposes. And it's usually because the source of the funds requires the restriction. So many grants, like Wendy was talking about, all of those big federal grants that helped support the culture of war, I think she said, in a police department. Usually they'll say, when you apply for the grant and you get it, they'll say you can only use the $6 million for exactly what we specify for in the grant. So although an operating expense might look enormous, and you might think, oh, how easy would it be to reallocate that $6 million from the police budget to mental health services. If it's a grant fund, if it's grant funded and it's restricted, it's a little more complicated than it might look as a line item budget item. Some fees and tax revenues are also restricted by law, so that'll be written into the law that levies the tax or the law that levies the fee. And if you want to change it, you might have to initiate a ballot initiative where you ask voters to approve the change in use of funds that are levied from a certain kind of tax, for example. Unrestricted funds are just the opposite. They can be used for any purpose as long as that purpose is consistent with the capital or operating designation of the fund. So a lot of tax revenue in Cincinnati, for instance, our earnings tax revenue is our biggest revenue generator. So that's the money you pay based on the income that you make, is unrestricted and can be used for any purpose, any operating purpose. Anyway, next slide. Okay, so another consideration when you're talking about public safety budgets are multi-year contracts. This is a big one when you're asking to reallocate public safety funds or decrease public safety funds. Most public safety budgets are usually a big percentage of a city's overall budgets. However, most of them go to staff costs, and staff costs are usually determined by union contracts with the city. So union contracts like the Fraternal Order of Police, or there's always a firefighters union as well, are usually multi-year. And they're negotiated well in advance of when they begin, right? So say a police budget or a police contract begins January 1st, it will usually be negotiated and voted on no later than August or September to make sure that the budget's all in place so the city can make plans for the following year. And it'll usually last 2 or 3 years. If the city breaks that contract once it's already in place, it would incur some significant financial penalties and would create a big mess for its attorneys to clean up. I know many folks might not care about that in the long term, but it is certainly something that elected officials don't want to be on the hook for causing. So when you are advocating to change public safety budgets in any way, it's important to know when the contracts expire, what they say, exactly how you propose to change them, and most importantly, when they are due to start being renegotiated. You might have to start making your case a year or more in advance of when the contract is due to start being negotiated to get all the buy-in that you need and all the balls kind of rolling in the right direction to impact those negotiations in a way that lets the contract turn out the way you want it to. So it's important to keep in mind, negotiating public safety budget changes is a very long game. It requires a lot of persistence and a lot of self-care, which Bones will talk about because it's a marathon, not a sprint. So next slide. Okay, engaging elected officials. So I tend to think about these issues in 3 buckets, right? So the first is hyper-local issues. These are usually like constituent issues. Maybe you want to add a speed bump or get the police to enforce the speed limit more consistently than they have been. So hyper-local, these things are usually pretty quick fixes. They're usually not political at all. They're not controversial. They probably don't even require a big funding push. And you can usually address them or get your elected official to address them with a phone call or an email, maybe 2 or 3 of those, and it's done. Pretty simple. The next set of issues are kind of middle-sized issues. There might be an obvious fix, but it could require some political will or a little bit of funding. It might affect an entire neighborhood or the whole city, but it tends not to be too partisan and the fix is easy. So maybe it's you have a litter issue, or maybe there's some violence or something that happens like outside of a club late at night when it gets out, and you just need a more consistent police presence. That is something that is pretty easy to fix. It might require a little bit of pressure put on city council to make sure that it's actually happening. Finally, we have major policy issues. So this is where I would say restructuring public safety departments falls. If you want to increase or decrease the number of sworn forces, these efforts are much harder, both in process, but also in building awareness and making your case to the public and other stakeholders. You might want to develop relationships with media to help amplify your case. You will definitely want to establish relationships with your elected officials and their staff and various members of city departments so that they come to think of you as credible and understand that when they make decisions in these spaces, they will want to call on you as a stakeholder, or else they will know that you have the capacity and the will to make a big deal out of it. So I think Hilly next will talk a little bit about do's and don'ts for engaging elected officials and city administration officials.
Thanks, Ioanna. So I'm just going to quickly go over some pretty basic do's and don'ts for how to talk to elected officials, whether it's one-on-one or in a public comment setting. So first one is pretty obvious. Don't be rude, even if you're upset. It's the quickest way to get elected officials to stop listening to you. Don't send unformatted, unedited stacks or pages of information. They will not get read. Elected officials and their staff are usually stretched very, very thin, and they just won't have time to sift through a whole lot of paperwork to try to get the most important information from what you give them. So you want to synthesize it for them, get them the points that you think that they need to have. And if you need to cover something in more detail than that, schedule a meeting, or attempt to schedule a meeting. Don't spam your elected officials or their staff. Again, it's a pretty easy way to get them to tune you out. If you don't make meaningful attempts to make meaningful contact with them, and you just kind of blow them up every day. Don't assume that your audience has the same experience as you. This is a big one. This is your time to make your audience, the elected officials, care about your experience. Make it important to them, because a lot of them can't know what your experience is. Don't forget to show community support. You know, rule of numbers, multiple people with the same message are going to be more memorable than one person with one message. Don't pitch media relentlessly. You want to try to have a media strategy when you reach out to the media. You want to try to focus in on one event, maybe a press conference, maybe one document, one message especially. Quality over quantity. Don't be boring. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. Don't propose something that's not timely. Again, your elected officials are stretched very thin. It's going to be hard for them to focus on something that's coming up down the road when they have something really big in front of them right now. Don't lead with your feelings. Like Maggie was talking about just a little bit ago, it's important to know your feelings and know your facts and figure out how they go together. Do be respectful of members and their staff. They will listen to you a lot more if you are respectful. Do be clear and succinct. Again, you don't get very much time to talk to your elected officials, so make it count. Do be persistent, but not rude. It's not unusual for you to have to try a number of times to contact your elected officials or get a meeting. So don't get frustrated, just keep trying. Do identify the problem and propose a clear solution. This is also a big thing. It's very easy to identify problems, but once you get the attention of your lawmakers, you need to have some ideas of what you want them to do. If you just say, I don't like this, this is a problem, find a way to fix it, you know, you can say that, but you're not going to get the results that you want. Do use facts, data, and anecdotes. This is also very important because if you want to get politicians on your side and you do get them, you want to make sure that they have something in their pocket that they can reference when they fight for your cause. Do know how the system works, and I hope that you are getting a better idea of that through our session here tonight. Do build a coalition. Again, there's strength in numbers, and elected officials, you know, they need votes, and more people's more votes. Just math adds up. Know when to go to the media. Again, this is an important thing about coming up with a media strategy. Just like elected officials, media, people that work at your news stations and newspapers and the other types of media that you're going to approach, they are also stretched very thin. So be very intentional about it. And be creative. You want to, you know, make yourself memorable. And our arts partner that's coming up next is going to talk about some really great ways to do that. So, Ioanna.
I can read the slide. Advocating for changes in the public safety budget can be a long game. Union contracts, multi-year budget allocations, restricted funds, and political will can all slow progress. It is important to focus on public messaging to build a sustained support that elected officials cannot ignore. And I can't think of any better practitioners to show you this instead of just tell you this than Pones, who are our art partners. I saw Ernasia and Ian both log on. So I'm going to hand it over to them.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Hi. So I'm Ian with Pones, and Pones I like to describe as an interactive dance and theatrical movement collective. And I think Ioanna described us really well as working within the intersection of public policy, public advocacy, and social change. And so I've been with the company for maybe 12 or 13 years since the very beginning. How about you, Arnasia? What you got going on?
I see in the chat that Arnasia asked if we can hear her. We cannot. We also can't see you. I don't know if maybe logging off and logging back on would help. Hmm. She says she's going to switch computers. Okay. See, Ian, do you have the Prezi? Would you like to share your screen?
Let me see.
I have it up. I have it up. I can pull it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Mhm. Okay. So Ian, just tell me when you want me to switch slides here.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, this is actually perfect while we wait for Arnasia, because I know Arnasia wanted to talk about the presentation and give you a little bit more info about who we are. But if you want to take a look at these questions and you can think about them now while we're kind of transitioning. So one, how do you change public perception of a budget item? How do you demonstrate its importance? How do you show the ways it will benefit the city and its residents? How do you communicate to those in the community who can advocate in tandem? And two, what specific policing budget item is most important or relevant to you right now? And so if anyone has any thoughts on any of that, feel free to chime in while we're waiting for Arnasia, or you can just write it down in your notes or think about it independently if you like. This is just kind of to get our brains going before we start to do some different activities.
Good evening. This is Catherine Gardette in the community of Walnut Hills. A policing item that I'm not certain it's even in the budget, but I certainly believe it should be in our policing budget, is a focus on mental health. And there are so many studies that have longevity to them. It's not like it's a study that was done in the last 12 months or even the last 5 years. We have studies from the last 20 years that show a relationship between incarceration and mental health capacity. And if we have mental health practitioners within our police department, our incarceration rates, I know, will decline.
Excellent. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. I switched computers. That is a fantastic thing. Hold that thought. I love that you have an answer to it. We're going to have a little thing at the end of our little presentation where we'll talk about what we can do to implement that. Yes, there I am. Hi. There's me. Okay, great. Next slide, please. Let's do this. Prezi time. Excellent. Alrighty. So we are Pones. My name is Arnasia, and I am an actor and in the city. And for Pones, I am a teacher with their Laboratory of Movement, and of course, a dancer for the past, Ian, 4 or 5 years? I've been here for a minute, honey. Been here for a minute. So about Pones. Pones is, we believe that art creates powerful change. We provide artistic opportunities for community growth by creating engaging new ways for audiences to experience dance, and not just dance. We are multidisciplinary. Our vision is to empower individuals to express themselves, understand one another, and better their communities through art. And of course, that it absolutely relates to this good old making policy change, social justice. Next slide. Boom, boom, boom. So we based our theories on the theater of the oppressed. Ian, could you talk a little bit about the theater oppressed? I actually always have someone talk about it. Just off the top of the dome is like that theater of the oppressed.
Theater of the oppressed, yeah. So essentially, art that is created by marginalized populations for marginalized populations, and so I'm trying to think of any specific examples that come to mind. Do you have any in your head?
Not quite, but like that's the point. Yeah, theater of the oppressed. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about it in our presentation. You know, for us, by us. So making art, you know, for us, by us, bringing to light, you know, exploitations and things that the oppressed are feeling, and allows spectators, you know, the audience, to become the actors as well. Bringing you in, inviting you in. That's the point. Next slide, please. So here we have a working definition of art as social justice. That is art that exposes and helps resolve issues of social justice. As a cultural tool, art helps humanize and actualize the emotions, grievances, and fears of those who may not have another place to voice concerns. As an illustrative and journalistic tool, art shocks and inspires us to action. So art as social justice. Next slide. Now, why art? Why art as a way to try to make social change? Because art touches the heart. Oh, that rhymes. I love that. Art touches the heart, right? So you've been talking this whole time about making social change, like the rules, the do's and don'ts, the logistics side, right? Maggie said, you know, don't bring in too many of those emotions. Well, the art, you don't have to bring in the emotions. Let the art speak for itself, right? Because we all know that phrase where it's like, like people don't care until it happens to them. Bam. It's the emotional tug, that pull that's going to help bring people in, bring people on your side. That's why they say make relationships with your council people, right? Because that is where it's at. You gotta have that. You gotta have the logistics, the logical, but really you want to touch that heart. So art is a way to show the reality and share the stories, right? When you really touch people by finding that common humanity there. Next slide. You see what I'm saying? That makes sense? Yes? Because, yeah. Go ahead, Ian.
I'm so with you. And yeah, also just thinking about how you're talking about, Hillary, how to engage policymakers too. And we'll talk more about this later on in our activity, but different ways of going about that. And to me, that's also looking at not just verbally going about it. So I know that we try so hard so many times, and probably many of you have been to council meetings, you know, getting your 2 minutes, trying to say what you want to say, making it meaningful and all that. And I think that sometimes they hear so much that we have to find different ways of engaging them. And art you can express in so many different ways, like poetry, visual art, film, music, and we all have an experience of where art touched us in a way where verbalizing or words necessarily didn't. So this is a perfect opportunity to do that.
Yes, I love how you said that they hear so much, Ian, and guess what? We have 5 senses. If they're hearing too much, what can they be seeing? What can they touch? What can they taste? What can they feel, right? Dance and art, all types of art form, is visceral. It's not cerebral, it's visceral, right? It can touch other senses. Next slide. And super important, right? It's less confrontational, but it's just as potent. right? We can, like, that's what I'm saying, touch other places, their senses, other hearts, and they won't turn away so much, right? And a piece of art forms less confrontational than spamming their email box, than yelling at them during your 2 minutes, but it's going to make a difference. They'll remember that. It's just as, or sometimes more potent. But I think it all works together. I think you got to have a bit of everything, right? Like I was saying this last year, I'm a storyteller, but just like I have my role in the long game, I have my role in making change, but I also need the people who are going to protest out in the streets. I'm going to need the people who are going to canvass and get people to vote. We all have our roles in the game, so you got to find where you are, how you're going to do it. And we are advocating for arts. Yay. Next slide. Excellent. So maybe stories are just data with soul. I love this quote. I love this quote, right? You're going to present the logical side. You're going to present all the facts, get your numbers together, get your spreadsheets, get all the logics together. However, what about if that data could talk? What if that data could tell a story, right? So let's talk more about that. Next slide. All righty, democratizing art. Okay, so we do this in a lot of different ways with our, we're gonna focus on one little branch of our Pones experience, but we do 3 different things. We, we do 3 different things. So we have our laboratory movement, which is teaching, right? Teaching, dance, teaching, that bringing that there, and it's free or low cost, right? We present that. We also do. We're going to talk about our productions and collaborations, but we also do Pones in Public, right? Pones in Public, where we're bringing the art to the people, to the streets, right? Sometimes it does happen in unexpected places at unexpected times, but we are trying to remove those barriers, right? So sometimes you'll see Pones in many different like random places in the city, but most likely you're going to see us in your community, right? And art for placemaking. When I think of placemaking, I think of making a place feel more welcome, feel like home, right? Having and when you welcome someone into your house, right, you're inviting them in. That's more inviting, right? Making a way to for people to feel more included. So if we bring the art to you, if we invite you in, it touches back to what I was saying earlier. It'll touch you more. It'll make a lasting change, stuff like that. So democratizing art, making people feel at home, right? Happening in unexpected times. Like when I'm an artist, but you're not always going to see me on a black box stage, right? I've been on Playhouse, I've been at Shakes, I go to the ballet, I do all of the professional things, but I also will dance in a cave. You know what I'm saying? I also will bring you gorgeous emotions through a film at the Fringe Festival. You will also see us, plugging our stuff. Come on in. You will also see us in the community, dancing with the children, getting to them, right? So removing the barriers, bringing it to people for free or low cost, taking away all that, what they think of art, stuff like that. Next slide. Excellent. Look at me. Okay, that's me on a thing representing Pones and collaboration. So this is important. The key word here is collaboration, working together. Keep that in mind. Next slide. So we're going to talk about some of our productions and collaborations where we really brought, dance for social change, and not just dancing for dancing's sake, but really brought it, for a purpose. So our first thing we're going to talk about, one of our productions that made a lasting difference, is Traffic. Okay, so Traffic was about human trafficking and how it relates to us here in Cincinnati and the surrounding areas, because some people don't know that Highway 75 is a major highway that is directly connected to human trafficking, right? So we created a piece that talks about the experience of people who've been trafficked, sex workers, things like that. And we partnered, this is important, we partnered with In Slavery Cincinnati, and we partnered with Caracol, which supports sex workers in the area. In the interest of time, Ian, do you have anything else you want to say about this? Yes, no?
Yeah, just in the nature of collaboration. Yeah, I think you mentioned we worked with sex workers themselves. And so it's important to us that if we are creating a piece about a specific population, that we also have as directly as possible their voice included in the work.
That is important, right? We're going to talk about that in another little section, but making sure you're, like we said with the theater to be pressed, art for us by us, actually having people tell their real stories, and inviting them in the process, inviting them to the show, making sure they have consent and everything. Here's the script. Here's what we're doing. Do you approve? Do you like it? Stuff like that. So we're going to show you this video because it's a short video. It's going to give you an idea, and then we'll talk more about some other stuff. Hilly, could you show the Say Their Names video? Not this one. I mean, the traffic video. That'd be gorgeous.
You know what? I've got it up. I can just.
Oh, yes. Whoever has it up, thank you.
Hey, Ioanna. I think there are a couple of settings that need to be clicked in the video share box in order for us to hear the sound.
Oh, you can't hear it?
Yeah, so actually, if you unshare your screen and then reshare it and click, there are two buttons in the bottom left. One of them is
Got it.
optimized for video and the other one is share sound.
I got it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There is a safe word, should any of you have the need to use it. The word is red light. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
You.
Honestly, I don't remember how I started working there. My mom don't like me working on the street though because she say people can get rough with you in their cars, so I just work in the crowd.
I could never make enough. I got in the car with 3 guys and they raped me and they beat me up. But see, I didn't get no money.
At least I ain't one of the girls who sits in the room for hours.
Place judgment right after you get paid my pussy right away because in this biz, pump legs don't get mad. Don't cry out. Loud tears don't exist and neither does your voice, your vocal cords choked by cocaine spoons and syrup tastes better than depression. And this numbness helps me get through this damn traffic in front of me and behind me is he, and he is enjoying his sloppy self.
Somebody's talking. I mean, how else could they know the password?
We stand before you now to invite you to join us, to be near to us, to take our hands. Together, we can awaken ourselves to the experiences we have just seen. As we exit the space, we remember the slavery that exists and the responsibility we have to end it. Please, join us.
Oh, I loved it. It's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Let's bring the Prezi back up. So that was one example of a collaboration that we have done. So not everything. So we obviously were talking about human trafficking and bringing that experience to life, and so people can have a better idea, a more visceral idea to it. So, that doesn't have the emotion that you're evoking doesn't always have to be so, right? We can also invoke joy. So the next thing we're going to show is place setting, which is on the Prezi. Next slide after that. Great. So place setting is another one of our productions that we've done at Fringe. Next slide. Look at Ian. You see Ian? He's right there. Okay, so place setting was created with information collected from workshops with 14 immigrants to Cincinnati, right? So in this production, we learned how important food was to cultural sharing. It mixed theater, it mixed cooking, it mixed dance, spoken word, visual art. You see how there's like even cooking is art, right? And Pam Kravitz was the artist who made the ceramic place settings. I love how this is so multidisciplinary. It mixed so many different things. So when we're going to do a little exercise later and we say like, the art doesn't have to be like a dance or a sculpture or things like that. Your art that you can use to make social change can be anything. Do you like to crochet? Cool. Do you like to paper mache? Whatever, whatever you do that could be it can be art. Yes. So I love this production because I was actually in the audience for this, right? So it was so great to, eat some good jollof rice, but also hear and see the stories of the immigrants. So this is a direct collaboration. The immigrants were on a screen on the back. So they're telling their story, right? So what is our objective here? Our objective here is, of course, is to, fight for immigrant rights and people. We are all people. We are literally supposed to be the melting pot. We need to actually show that. So why don't we actually show that? That's the joy of cooking and being with family and friends and mixing it all together, right? So it was a gorgeous show. I really did enjoy that, right? So shout out to place setting. Next slide. There's more pictures here, more pictures of people in the audience. Look at them enraptured and eating gorgeously. Next slide. All right, so now we have our Pones Move initiative. And this was rose last year as a direct response to the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, et cetera. I hate to have to say et cetera, but it is murders that happened. So Pones is an initiative Move is an initiative by Pones to amplify and raise BIPOC voices, as Black, Indigenous, people of color voices. So the first thing we did was we kind of revamped a piece that a part of a piece from a Fringe show a couple years ago, and it's called Say Their Names. And it literally, I'm going to put the link to the video in the chat, which you all can watch on your own time because it's a little long, so we can't show it today because we're short on time. But I want you all to watch that and get that visceral feeling from it. But basically, Say Their Names is a dance piece with a spoken word piece mixed together, and we kind of dance and we kind of show the deaths of a couple influential Black lives that were lost. We do Timothy Douglas, who died right here on 13th and Republic. I personally, I want to share this picture, but I can't share my screen. I ended up dancing, Breonna Taylor's death, and I of course was affected, that summer, those months. But I, as a storyteller, never truly connected so much with Breonna Taylor's story until I was literally dancing her death, So it affected me, and I know it affected other people as well. Ian, do you have anything to say? Ian is actually the, cinematographer, our videographer for this lovely piece.
Yeah, no, I think I just want to compliment the work that you did and that you put into it. And I think that you made a great point in that when you're creating art in this way, not only does it is it able to affect the audience in a significantly different way, but also the performer themselves. You had a transformative experience and I had a transformative experience documenting it. And so I just think that that's just something that I think is encouraging about using art as a vehicle for social change. If you are at all intimidated by that idea, I encourage you to just go for it 100%.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian. Move is still an ongoing process. If you go to our website, which is pones.org, which I will type here, pones.org. If you know if you yourself are, oh yay, I can share my screen now. I want to share this picture. Yes, I want to share this picture. Give me 2 seconds of this gorgeous picture. Go away. Share this picture of say their names. So yeah, this is me, literally being Breonna Taylor, sleeping in her bed before it happened. And we had our mask on with I Can't Breathe. Literally, that was very poignant to literally have on masks in the middle of summer and they were thick and we really couldn't breathe while we were dancing. And we had that there, but it was a very, I put the link in the chat, please watch it. Please watch it, yes, do that. Okay. So what was I saying? So if you yourself are a BIPOC voice or you know someone and you want to come, all you gotta do is you come with the idea and Pones will support you. We can provide a little money, a little marketing support, etc. Cool, great. All right, let's finish up this Prezi. So wrapping up all of our thoughts. Boom, about us, without us. Okay, so points we want to make about what we were talking about. Your art can create and provide measurable change, all right? You want to make sure that the art is created by the people we are talking about. So every piece that we talked about, whether it was the actual sex workers or the immigrants or the BIPOC voices that we are uplifting, they are actually creating the art themselves. So if you yourself are not a member of the community that you are trying to make a policy change with, collaborate with someone, collaborate, work alongside those community groups, all right? Make sure those partners and collaborations are signing off on it. Art isn't just for entertainment. You don't have to create art just for art's sake. It can provide measurable change and help prevent or change or do anything with an issue. And last but not least, when you're making your art piece, make sure you end off with a call to action, okay? So as you saw our gorgeous friend Derek at the end of the video for traffic, he literally gave the spiel and he said, join us, right? Make sure your piece has a call to action. Got it? Fantastic. Alrighty, so now we're gonna do a super, super quick movement break led by our illustrious Ian. Ian, take it away.
All right, everybody. So we're just going to, if you would like to, you can get up out of your seat for a second and we're just gonna move around and we're gonna do some things that make us feel good. So advocating for social change takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of work. And I think that something that is important that I think something that we might miss as we're advocating for social change is that we need to be able to sustain this energy by having self-care techniques. That includes being in Zoom meetings that are hours long, and I don't think yours has been hours long, but if you are in one, which you probably have that experience, having a movement break, instill it into your routines. So first of all, we'll just go ahead and get up. You can shake some things out. Yeah, so if there's anything stuck, go ahead and just move it around. Doesn't matter what you look like. Be as noodly as you want. Good, and then go ahead and just start to slow down that shake. And let's go ahead and just do a little bit of twisting here. Just let the arms be nice and loose. And just take some really deep inhales, deep exhales as you're doing this. If there's any sort of stuck or energy or negativity that's left inside the body right now, just go ahead and take a big inhale in and exhale. Just let it all out really deep. Start to slow down that twist. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and get our fingers a little bit ready here. We're gonna start at the top of the head. Just give yourself a little bit of a scalp massage so you can pull on the hair a little bit. If you don't have as much hair, that's totally okay. You can just massage the scalp a little bit here. And you just wanna get the little synapses in the brain flowing a little bit, get some energy at the top of the scalp. Go ahead and use the fingertips to just massage out through the sides of the forehead. Start to tap down around the eyelids just to wake things up a little bit more. We can hold a lot of tension around our eyes, especially if we've been squinting at a screen all day. So this is a great way to just release, tug at the cheeks a little bit. Yes, and we'll go ahead and give a little tug on the ears. Good. Give yourself a little bit of a massage through the sides of the neck. Good, and we're just gonna pat down the front of the body. You can let out noise if you want to. I like to. And then we'll go down the outside of one arm and up the inside, down the outside, up the inside. Good, other side. Very nice, very nice. We'll go down the front of one leg and up the back and down the front and up the back. Good, and then we'll go to the other leg. And then just let the spine hang for a moment. Go ahead and pat the low back a little bit here. Good, and then release the arms, let the spine hang. Go ahead and just let your spine swing a little bit side to side. You can bend from one knee to the other. And nice and easy, start to roll up one vertebrae at a time. Keep that sway all the way until you get up at the top. And then as you come all the way to standing, just let your eyes close for a moment. Take the hands to the chest or the heart area and just kind of feel where your body's at now. So we didn't do too much, but maybe you can just start to feel a difference in your energy. Notice if your energy is flowing a little bit more efficiently, smoothly, if you feel a little bit more motivated. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Go ahead and just let everything go. Awesome. Yay. Thank you for joining me in that. I could do that all day. So I'm sorry that we don't have more time. I wish we had like 45 minutes just to like feel ourselves and feel really good. But I hope you feel a little bit more energized. And we're gonna go into an activity now. And so we'll get into small groups, and what will happen is we're going to say that again.
Actually, Ian, in the interest of time, we're going to do it one large group.
One large group. Oh, I think that's amazing. Awesome. So one large group activity. So you all have your worksheet that is called Art as a Form of Protest available in front of you.
Let me finish. I got to get the Prezi back up. But basically what this exercise is short and sweet. We're going to have a few minutes, right? If you only had 2 minutes, because that's what you have when you make a presentation, right? If you have 2 minutes, what are some things that you could do? So for example, here are some more like installations, some pictures that people did around the world, by the way, around the world. Yay, yay, yay. So you have these here, which they tied life jackets in front of the like the courtroom, the court building, whatever. And each life jacket represented a refugee who lost their lives trying to cross the waters. Talk about visceral, boom, boom. So like I said, your art does not have to be a typical type of art form. They literally tied life jackets, right? Gorgeous. Then we have here, so I think this was, yes. So what they did was in this country, they outlawed the homeless from literally begging for money. Like you couldn't use your voice to beg for money. How horrible. So a artist put a boombox and put a recording of a like a robot voice, not an actual human voice, but like a recording of someone asking for money because the actual homeless people couldn't do it themselves. So then all the money was collected and donated to the homeless. And then this one here is because it's an installation that attracted, I think, like the butterflies or like something like that, because they wanted to build a highway across this land and it was going to mess up the migration. And we need, you know, all our insects, all our bees, all our butterflies, we need all them to like, you know, have an earth. So they created a literal installation here to kind of like show how important it is and to track the butterflies and all that gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. So what we're going to do in the next literally like 3 minutes, we're going to bring it back to Ian. We're going to talk about it. We're going to figure out what's as a group, what's a major thing that we would like to make a policy change or something for, and what's a type of cool art piece that we can do. And we're going to follow those questions. Ian, go.
Would you like me to share the worksheet?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, so the way we can go about this is sort of just informal. If anyone has an idea that they would like to share, or if anyone has a question about the question that we're asking here, we're happy to help walk you through it. Basically, the first question that we have here is, what are we advocating for? So is there any cause that you're feeling really strongly about that you want to address?
I know my friend from the beginning had something to say. What was that? What was that again?
That was one, but a more relevant one is all of the recreation pools open for the summer.
Ooh, okay. So we're advocating to open up all in our hypothetical situation here. We're advocating to have all the recreation pools open for the summer. Okay. So what is the problem here? Is it because certain neighborhoods don't get pools, certain neighborhoods don't get maintenance? What's the underlying cause here?
A combination of that. There are many urban pools that are not opening this summer.
Right. Okay. So that makes plenty of sense to me because hello, racism. Anyway, so what are some art forms that we can use? Like what is something that we can use to show off this? Like, for example, I had one group one time, they wanted to show transparency from the police and, you know, transparency on the budget. So we used visual art, right? We had an aquarium, and inside the aquarium, we worked with like a sculpture artist to create like these figurines, like pigs, which represented like the police, like throwing money and all this like all this random stuff. And the audience member had to literally wipe the dirt off of the thing to make it transparent, right? So what is an art form that we can use to kind of show pools, to show what we're trying to say, the disparity, the what's the words, you know, that all the pools aren't being opened. Is one pool brown and one pool clear, one pool clear? I mean, come on, I'm just being real with it, Ian, like, right?
Yeah, and just a reminder too, like it doesn't have to be in the form of a live performance. It can be poetry, it can be something visual, like you saw the vests on the columns. That's something that's always there.
Right.
I know last time I did this, someone talked about putting masks on all of the statues in Cincinnati, so all of the statues on Fountain Square and like anywhere you find any sort of monument like that. So there are so many different ways, and you can also be multidisciplinary about it, if that's helpful for any ideas.
So you could do a graph chart, but the graph chart tying into what you were saying about if we just look at the children who are not able to go to a pool during the summer, look at the neighborhoods that are there, because we know from the census, the race and the ages, that the demographics that they fall in, versus a neighborhood that does have a pool and do the same. So you have a graph of, this is what it looks like for where the pools are open, and this is what it looks like for where the pools aren't open, by colored graph paper.
Colored graph paper, my mind went, okay.
Or colored paper that represents the complexion of who's who's not able to go to a pool.
Or a mural. I'm just gonna put it out there. And not colored paper. I'm gonna just look, we gonna draw people. Here's some little brown boys and girls, and they're looking sad because you don't let them swim. And then you just push the stereotype that Black and brown people don't swim or can't swim. The pools.
I also think, you know, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking that because it's also happening on the west side where the demographics are the reverse of the neighborhood where I live. So then you actually have to show the economics of the families who have access to the pool versus those who don't.
Oh my gosh, I just had an idea because I mean, I was a little Black girl. I can't swim, right? And I don't do the water that much. Why? I don't know. Maybe because my public pool wasn't open. What if we did, I don't know, what if we did like, I really think a mural, because especially because Cincinnati loves its murals, right? What if we did like, we started off as like, and we see like adults being like, I can't swim, or I don't swim, or I'm scared of the water, I don't get on a boat. Like, what do we see like these quotes? And somehow we visually show the timeline of like them going back to children and why? Because you didn't open up their pools. They didn't get swim lessons. Does that make sense?
It does.
You know, I'm trying to show like a visual, like instead of like not just putting the graphs is number, what's going to be visceral here? That connects to their adult life. And I'm like, we find all these adults because of this. So I'm like, I'm wondering, what if, you know how they do like the, you know, the thing like where you go from like the caveman to the adult. What if it's like an adult and then you go down to the children and it all stems because you didn't let them swim? Just thought that. Right? So then who would you collaborate with, right? There's a ton of people in the city who does those murals, those programs. I love how didn't our friend Sky even work with like there's like a school of like visual artists around town, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Artwork
yes, and
for doing a mural.
Yeah, artworks like artworks could do. They have like apprenticeship programs. You can have BIPOC artists actually do it. Work with artworks to create the murals, stuff like that. And that's kind of like the community partners organization. See how I'm like trying to invite. I'm trying to like, and I would love because Artworks has an apprenticeship program, so you can have like adult artists as well as young artists coming up, working together. When and where, one of the most anywhere that a mural can be seen, right? Pick a good building, put it up there so people can see it. And what will be your measurement for success? Is there an advocacy piece after the performance? Measurement of success. Ooh, what about some kind of artistic arrangement, powerful visual using a variety of mini blow-up pools in neighborhoods that don't have one? Ooh, could put them close to public institutions to create additional awareness. Come on, Justin. Ooh, I like that. Mini blow-up pools, right? You don't want to open the pools, we're gonna bring the pools to you. Ooh, I like that.
Go anywhere. Just throwing it out there.
Throwing it out there. That was a good one, Justin. Okay. So we have to wrap it up. It's 8:30. But thank you so much, Hilly. But take this worksheet, take what we talked about, and figure out how you can bring art, how you can, make your policy changes more visceral and get to their emotions, people. That's where the change really happens. That's where people are affected. Poems out.
Thank you both so much. We always try to end on a fun artistic note, so it keeps people around. I always look forward to our arts partner presentation the most, and I really appreciate you all bringing your energy on a Tuesday evening, and I appreciate our attendees for showing up and spending your Tuesday evening with us. Thank you all so much. Maybe I'm going to put my contact info in the chat, and if anyone else wants to put their contact info in the chat, please go for it. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you to all. Thanks to Pones. You guys are amazing.
I'll see you Thursday.
I know, 2 nights this week, Catherine.
I know, my fortune.
All mine. Bye.